Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be checking out some very fun battles in the Ultra League Premier Cup, featuring a very powerful COREBREAKER, Shadow Brutal Swing Ampharos. Ampharos is a pure electric type Pokemon with the moveset of Volt Switch, Brutal Swing, and Focus Blast, although personally I might recommend running Thunder Punch over Focus Blast. For the team, I paired it up with a Gyarados Save Switch and a Shadow Abomasnow closer, and had all positive sets. So without further ado, let's hop into matches and check out Shadow Brutal Swing Ampharos in action in the Ultra Premier Cup. Picking up a great lead in the first match, Shadow Ampharos into Empoleon. Opponent save switches into a Wing Attack Charizard, and they are absolutely core broken by Ampharos. They go for a Dragon Claw, I tank it like it's nothing, I throw two more Volt Switches, switch, and then catch the Dragon Claw onto my Gyarados. Gyarados will comfortably tank the Dragon Claw, and now I will commit to the farm down. Charizard able to reach a last second move on 1 HP. Again, only a Dragon Claw, so not really a problem. Gyarados gets the full farm down and leaves with some energy to take on Empoleon. Empoleon may look to try and go for the resisted waterfall farm down, but this is a bit of a tricky farm down. I fire off the Crunch, they let it through, Gyarados continues to farm, and I reach Crunch number 2. I notice my switch timer should be up, so I'm gonna go for a Snipe. I switch into Ampharos, and I'm able to get rid of their energy. In the back, they have Trevenant, and this Trevenant is about to learn the meaning of pain. Brutal Swing, massive damage, and I should be able to reach 2 more Brutal Swings versus this Trevenant. This is gonna grab the first shield. Opponent tries to farm down, but Shadow Ampharos cannot be stopped. Reaching another Brutal Swing, able to grab both shields, and now I can bring in Shadow Abomasnow, and honestly, I think I should be able to 2-shield flex here. I'm gonna tank the Shadow Ball. They reach another move, only a Seed Bomb. Abomasnow is going to be able to tank that as well, and that is a good game. Picking up a pretty tough lead in the next match, Shadow Ampharos into Swampert. I'm going to stay in this matchup to start, throw 1 Volt Switch, and then Save Switch into Gyarados. My opponent is going to respond with a Wall Rain. Not the greatest matchup ever for Gyarados, but if I do get a Crunch debuff, then I can potentially make a play for Switch. I tank the Icicle Spear, I'm going to farm up, and then fire off the Crunch. This, of course, is not going to come close to KOing, so my opponent has no reason to shield it, but I do get that ever-important defense drop. That is quite nice, and now, honestly, I'm going to start shielding. Icicle Spear does get the shield. I'm going to continue to farm, and I go for a pretty risky bait here with the Aqua Tail. Probably not an advisable bait, to be honest, but I am able to grab a shield, and the threat of the next charge move forces them to throw their energy faster. Now, this is kind of nice because this should allow Shadow Ampharos to farm down, and now Shadow Ampharos gets to leave with a charge move loaded. My opponent is going to send in their Swampert, and Swampert will fire off a Hydro Cannon. I let this through as I do survive a Hydro Cannon. I'm going to build up to the Focus Blast and then bait with a Brutal Swing. I am trying to get a shield advantage for my Abomasnow. Opponent commits the shield. In comes Shadow Abomasnow, and in the back, they have a Wing Attack Charizard. Wing Attack Charizard is a tricky matchup for Shadow Abomasnow, but with a shield advantage, I'm in a pretty nice spot here. My opponent is going to fire off their charge move. I commit the shield, and they go straight for the Blast Burn. That's a big shield. I will now be able to overfarm quite a bit, fire off this Weather Ball to KO, and since I have a Brutal Swing loaded, all I have to do is get the Swampert into Brutal Swing range. So I'm going to be firing off this Weather Ball. Weather Ball, not going to KO, but does put it into Brutal Swing range, and Shadow Ampharos does win CMP over Swampert, so even if they double up on charge moves, it does not matter. Ampharos, Brutal Swing, taking out the Swampert, and that is a good game. Moving into the next match, picking up a slightly favorable lead, Shadow Ampharos into Dragonite. I do have 2 better responses in the back though, so I throw 1 Volt Switch and Save Switch into Gyarados. My opponent is going to farm up some extra energy before firing off the Dragon Claw. I'm going to let this go. They land the Dragon Claw, and now they're going to send in Trevenant. I'm going straight for the Crunch, no baiting here, hoping to try and land some super effective damage. Crunch gets the shield. My opponent fires off a Seed Bomb right away. Definitely a miscalculation by my opponent, as they could have farmed down. And now I can take advantage of their mistake and bring in the Shadow Abomasnow. Abomasnow should be able to shield once and then farm up close to 100 energy. They fire off a charge move, I commit the shield, and it is the Shadow Ball. That's big. I'm going to continue to overfarm, fire off a Weather Ball, and Weather Ball is going to be lethal. I do want to preserve some HP on this Abomasnow because they could have a counter to it in the back, and as you're going to see, they do. They have a Machamp. I should be able to reach the double Weather Balls, and then I'm going to trust in Shadow Ampharos to close this game. I reach Weather Ball number 2. This should get it pretty close to half health, and now it's all up to Ampharos. I send in the Ampharos. My opponent sends back in the Dragonite, but with the energy lead, Ampharos outpaces. This Brutal Swing will KO, and now I just have to get rid of this Machamp. This is definitely a situation where I would love to have access to Thunder Punch, but unfortunately, I am not running it. I think I need one more Volt Switch and a Brutal Swing, but I lose CMP. Can Shadow Ampharos survive here? Cross Chop, barely, not enough to KO. The rank 8 IVs coming in clutch. Ampharos takes down Machamp and secures the win. Dream lead in the next match, Shadow Ampharos into Gyarados. My opponent is going to save switch into Snorlax. I'm going to stay in this matchup, tank a move, farm all the way up to a Focus Blast, and then bait with a Brutal Swing. I don't have a clean answer to a Snorlax save switch, so I want to try and grab a shield advantage. The Brutal Swing bait does get the shield, and now I can send in Gyarados. And Gyarados should be in a pretty nice spot here with a shield advantage. This Snorlax does have some loaded energy, which is a bit scary, but I've managed to get some chip damage here, so now I should be able to put in some work. I decided to go for a Crunch here. I'm basically just fishing for a debuff. I go for the Crunch, and unfortunately no debuff to be found. My opponent is at the back-to-back charge moves here. I'm hoping that the Dragon Breath is going to KO before they get there, but it does not. Quite unfortunate. My opponent is going to be able to grab a shield. Thankfully, this does minimize the amount of farm that my opponent's Gyarados does get versus mine, although they decide to send in Trevenant, so things are looking really nice for me here. I'm able to reach the Crunch. Crunch connects. Big super effective damage onto the Trevenant. I send in Shadow Abomasnow. Shadow Abomasnow is going to be met with the Shadow Ball. They cannot reach 2 moves, so there's no point in them baiting, and now they're going to send in Gyarados. Gyarados is now in a pretty tough spot where they're going to have to get through an entire Shadow Abomasnow as well as a Shadow Ampharos. I will fire off another Weather Ball. They should be grabbing the final shield from my opponent, and I have the Brutal Swing loaded on my Shadow Ampharos. Shadow Ampharos is going to be able to get that Gyarados extremely low. Gyarados will fire off a charge move, and from here, Shadow Abomasnow can cleanly finish off this game. Farming down the Gyarados, farming down the Trevenant, and that is a good game. The great leads continue in the next match, Shadow Ampharos into another Gyarados. My opponent will immediately save switch into Swampert, and I respond with my Gyarados. I'm in a fantastic position here. Most Swamperts in the Ultra League Premier Cup are not running Sludge Wave, so Gyarados is in a dominating position where I can tank 3 Hydro Cannons if need be. I'm going to fire off the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail will of course get no shielded, and I'm just going to continue to farm here. My opponent is going to reach Hydro Cannon number 2. I'm going to let that through, and I'm just going to continue to farm, and as you're going to see, I do get a little greedy here. They're able to reach Hydro Cannon number 3, and this gets me a bit lower than I remember it doing previously, so I'm forced to fire off my Aqua Tail. Definitely playing it a bit risky there. I should have just fired off the Aqua Tail sooner, and my opponent will bring back in their Gyarados. I bring in Shadow Ampharos, and this is quite unfortunate, because my opponent, as you're going to see, has an Alolan Muck in the back, and they call the Brutal Swing bait. This is definitely a situation where having Thunder Punch would be quite nice. I commit the shield. They go for the Dark Pulse. At the very least, they didn't go for the Acid Spray. I'm going to farm back up to the Focus Blast and bait with a Brutal Swing, hoping to try and grab a shield, and I do get a shield. I'm going to send in Abomasnow. Abomasnow will be able to tank a Dark Pulse here, so I'm going to let this through. My opponent goes for a Sludge Wave, and I get one shot, and that is basically going to be game over, because as you're going to see, I'm just not going to be able to output enough damage onto this Gyarados since I'm not running Thunder Punch. This is the game that more or less made me think that, hey, running Thunder Punch over Focus Blast, probably a pretty nice idea, because as you're going to see, I have all the energy in the world in this moment, but I just don't quite have the finishing power that I would need with Thunder Punch, and I lose the match. Picking up a very nice lead in the next match, Shadow Ampharos into Lapras. This is another matchup where potentially having Thunder Punch over Focus Blast could prove to be handy, because while you can full send the Focus Blast if it gets shielded, this matchup honestly gets a bit awkward. I decide to build up to the Focus Blast and bait with a Brutal Swing, hoping to try and grab a shield from my opponent. Brutal Swing gets no shielded, and that is unfortunate, as this means that I will actually have to go down a shield, despite the type advantage matchup. I'm going to throw one more, bank the energy, bring in Gyarados, and snipe just before they're able to reach their charge move. My opponent is going to send in a Poison Jab Roserade. Honestly, that's a pretty cool pick, but but a very glassy one, so this crunch should be grabbing a shield. My opponent does commit the shield, and I get the defense drop as well. I'm going to let this through in case they go for the Weather Ball, and they do go for the Weather Ball. That's quite nice. The threat of an Aqua Tail, thanks to the debuff, is now enough to force them to throw their energy again, and now I should be able to bring in Shadow Abomasnow and farm all the way down. We'll have to see what they have in the back, and they have Wing Attack Charizard, but with an energy lead, Shadow Abomasnow can put in a lot of work here. I aggressive switch back into the Shadow Ampharos, and I have the double Brutal Swings loaded. First one will grab the shield, and the second one is going to basically KO. Gets them to 1 HP, Volt Switch gets the knockout, and Shadow Ampharos clutches the win. Nightmare lead in the next match, Shadow Ampharos into Como-O. I do have 2 better responses in the back, so I am going to save switch into Gyarados. Como-O is going to stay in and fire off a Dragon Claw. I'm going to let this through. A Dragon Claw is not going to KO. And then my opponent sends in a Waterfall Primarina. I do not know what this team is, but it completely RPSs mine. They will be able to fully farm down here, which is quite unfortunate. I will reach a second Aqua Tail, and I'm actually going to decide to not throw my third. I will be able to reach a third, but I decide instead I want to try and get some energy on my Shadow Ampharos. My opponent is going to be firing off a move. I commit the shield. They go for the Psychic. Ampharos is going to get the farm down, and I just have to hope that Shadow Abomasnow can close in the endgame. Opponent is going to send back in Como. I bring in Abomasnow. They have Charizard in the back, and I concede the match. Moving on from that last battle, we pick up a pretty nicely Shadow Ampharos into Walrein. Walrein does of course have Earthquake, which could hit for super effective damage, but I have the super effective Volt Switches, and they add up quite a bit. This is enough for the Earthquake. I will respect it with a shield. My opponent is going to go for the Icicle Spear bait. A bit unfortunate. I'm going to farm up and fire off the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing not going to be lethal from this range, but would do quite a lot of damage. My opponent is going to let that through, and I will fire off the Brutal Swing just to ensure they can't reach the Earthquake. They decide to commit the shield. I'm more than happy to double shield in this matchup, so this way I can leave with a lot of energy and switch advantage for whatever my opponent decides to send in. They send in Shadow Swampert. I'm going to bank a Focus Blast, bring in Gyarados, and they have a Wing Attack Charizard in the back, so their back line is absolutely core broken by Gyarados. Dragon Claw is going to connect. I continue to farm, and I'm firing off the Aqua Tail. This Aqua Tail will apply a ton of pressure onto my opponent. They let it through. They're able to reach a last second move. Unfortunately, this is going to land, but the nice thing is it's not enough to KO, and I leave with the charge move loaded. And why that matters is Gyarados wins CMP over Swampert, so they're now going to have to tank that damage, and they lose CMP, so they're not able to farm up anymore. And from here, I can safely bring in the Shadow Abomasnow to soak their energy. Opponent sees a writing on the wall and concedes the match. Hopping into the final match, picking up a tough lead, Shadow Ampharos into Swampert. Same game plan as always, throwing 1 Volt Switch, and then I am going to save switch into Gyarados. My opponent is going to stay in, bank a ton of energy, and then send in Gallade. Since they stayed in as long as they did, I should be able to apply some nice pressure in this matchup. I fire off the first Aqua Tail, they let that through, and I'm able to outpace, reaching my second Aqua Tail before they're able to fire off their Leaf Blade. That's going to force a shield from Gallade. Gallade will be able to reach 2 Leaf Blades here if I try and farm down, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm perfectly fine with double shielding, farming down, because if I can take switch here, then I should be in a very nice spot. Gyarados is going to be able to farm down and leave with a move loaded, so if they bring back in the Swampert, I'll be able to win CMP, and that's exactly what they do. Gyarados firing off the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to connect, and they will go for the Hydro Cannon to get the KO. Perfectly fine by me. I can now send in the Shadow Abomasnow into their Swampert. In the back, they have Dragonite, and they are absolutely torn to shreds by the Shadow Abomasnow. This Weather Ball will get a shield. I'll farm up a bit more, and then send in the Shadow Ampharos. This Ampharos, at this point, will basically just be used as a damage sponge. I'm going to threaten a farm down to force them to throw their energy, and that's exactly what they're going to do. And from here, Shadow Abomasnow is going to be able to clean up this game. Abomasnow gets the farm down. Swampert, this is probably Weather Ball range, but just to be sure, we're going to go for the Energy Ball. Hydro Cannon, not going to KO, and I'm able to outpace. Energy Ball, massive overkill, taking out the Swampert, and that is a good game. All in all, Brutal Swing feels like a fantastic addition to Shadow Ampharos. As I mentioned at the beginning, I would probably sub out Focus Blast for Thunder Punch, as Thunder Punch does allow Ampharos to shore up the type advantage matchups a lot better, but with Brutal Swing, it gives it some very nice coverage, especially in that Trevenant matchup. The ability to hit Trevenant for super effective damage as an electric type is incredibly useful. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.